All right, looks like we are ready to go here. Hello, everyone. I'm Walter Davis, Senior Manager of CRE Strategic Relationships at Sage Software, and I'm pleased to welcome you all to this webinar hosted by our industry partner, RedTeam, entitled Integrating Pre-Construction and Construction Operations with Sage Intacct. Before we start, a big shout out to our friends in Florida riding out the hurricane. Our thoughts and prayers are with you. Also, as we go throughout the webinar, please enter your questions in the Q&A box as we go along, and we'll get to all of those at the end. So during this webinar, you're going to hear how RedTeam complements our Sage construction accounting solutions through the tracking of every aspect of your contractual agreements while providing comprehensive archiving and audit trails along the way. We're privileged to have as our presenter today, Michael Wright, founder and chief strategy officer of RedTeam. Michael brings more than 25 years of hands-on experience in all aspects of construction, including being a general contractor himself. I think you'll find his perspective both unique and practical. And with that, Michael, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you all for the introduction. Well, good morning and good afternoon to everyone. I'm really excited to see we actually have a pretty good group of people that have joined us today. So what I'd like to do is start off. I'm going to add a little bit to what Walt said, because it is kind of part of the story of RedTeam itself. Walt mentioned that I am a general contractor. I'm going to date myself. That actually goes back almost 30 years at this point. I was one of 3 partners who started up a commercial construction company many, many years ago. That business is actually still in business today. So it's nearly 30 years old. RedTeam, the platform, is actually software that we developed really to run our construction company. It was built out of need. And I think that as you look at our platform, I think it becomes pretty apparent that it's informed by our hands-on experience in commercial construction. And I think that's a real differentiator for RedTeam as a product. So when you're starting up a new business, one of the first things you have to figure out is really how to foster teamwork in the organization. Of course, way back in the very beginning, there were just 3 of us. And one of my partners took responsibility for pre-construction, and that included things like cost estimating, bid solicitation. Ultimately, it was winning bids and negotiating work for our business. I had another partner whose expertise was really project management and managing the field. And my background was actually in accounting and finance. And so it's something that I share with many of our attendees today. So we have a very similar background. One would think, we're all committed to the success of the business, that we should all get along. One of the things that I discovered, though, is that the 3 of us had very different focuses on the business. And so we had a very different way of going about doing the things each day that we thought were going to make the company successful. The pre-construction team, my partner managing pre-construction, his job was to win. And his focus day in and day out was on winning. My partner, who's actually building the projects for our business, his focus was on delivering the building. And when you talk to the people in the field, they'll oftentimes have a very distinct viewpoint about what's important. They are, it might be a very small project, but to them, they're building a cathedral. And so the delivering of the project becomes very, very important. On the other hand, from my perspective, my job was to protect the business. And it turns out that these distinct viewpoints can be very challenging. While the reality is we all have to work together for the business to be successful, the challenge is these distinct viewpoints sometimes create contention in the business. And I know we have enough people on our call that I can almost hear the eyes rolling, because I think all of you at some point have experienced the challenge of dealing with your colleagues in these respective departments. And you've probably seen the very friction that I'm describing. So I know you're here today to talk about cloud software and the opportunities to moving to a cloud platform, specifically Sage Intacct. And the reasons to move to cloud are many, and you probably are well aware of these things. Obviously, one of the big appeals to moving to a cloud platform is lower total cost of ownership compared to on-premise software. There are simply fewer moving parts to manage when you're using a cloud platform, and that turns out to be lower cost overall over time. Instant access to information. That's something that we take for granted in so many parts of our lives. And it's certainly something that benefits our business organizations. And finally, there's the obvious flexibility and scalability of communication and collaboration. The ability of cloud to connect all of our internet devices like smartphones, iPads, and tablets, and all the various things that we can connect through the cloud simply makes things easier across all aspects of what we do day in and day out. But the real question is, will these things actually help us deliver more successful projects, more predictable outcomes? Is it going to make our business more successful? And that's really the question of the day. What the thing that we should be looking at is really asking ourselves, is this investment going to be worth it for our respective businesses? I actually spoke at a conference last week, and it was a construction technology conference. And to be honest, the speaker before me was amazing. His name was Ken Sullivan. Very interesting conversation and presentation that he put together. And he answered this question for us, and his answer was a bit surprising, and it needs a little bit of an explanation. But his answer was, the technology alone is not in and of itself going to improve the quality of your outcomes and the quality of your business. And this is not something that he simply observed. It's actually something he studies. And so he's a professor at Arizona State University, and he has a very specific focus on the use of technology and the implementation of technology to improve the construction industry. And his answer was no. These things don't in and of themselves improve the quality of your business. He said the only thing that's correlated with successful outcomes is the capability, skill, and experience of the people doing the work. So that's kind of a hard pill to swallow for somebody who's looking at a significant technology investment. The bottom line is it's about people. And in fact, I would argue that the use of cloud technology is about people. It's about creating an environment where your people are happy. We know that if we can create and deploy integrated workflows that reduce duplication and repetitive effort, we can free up time for people for more of a strategic focus on executing their jobs and their roles. Strategic focus enables people to deliver better outcomes, and better outcomes, quite frankly, make us happy. And so the bottom line is the reason to even consider an investment in cloud technology is to improve the quality of life of your people. Now, Ken Sullivan also talked a lot about the harsh reality of today's professional environment. We have fewer people relative to the amount of work being done interested in being in commercial construction. Let's face it, it's hard work. We've got some unprecedented demographics that are making it even more challenging to bring people, nevertheless qualified people, into our businesses. And so creating an environment where people can thrive, creating an environment where they're happy and they stay and they remain productive for us, that is job one in what we have to do. So unfortunately, it's hard to get people to change. So change is difficult for everybody. And one of the empirical observations that Ken Sullivan had about the implementation of new technology is he said 8% of our people will never adopt new technology, no matter what the argument. And so that's kind of a tough reality. The way you get people to change things is to show them exactly what it means to them. And so what we're going to demonstrate today is 4 core workflows. And these workflows are facilitated by RedTeam integrated with Sage Intacct. And we picked these 4 workflows out of the many because these are cross-functional. These are things that engage people in pre-construction, construction, and administration. And what we'd like to do today is show you actually using the system in an integrated environment that can demonstrate, and something you can share with your teams to demonstrate the impact of this technology on people's day-to-day workflows. So the first one I'm going to show you is related to estimating costs and proposal pricing, and I'm sure you can agree that this is a critical function in your organizations. What's going to be interesting about this very short video clip that I'm going to show is this is live and it's real time. And so what we're demonstrating here is somebody using the application to create a cost estimate that as you look at it, looks very much like a spreadsheet. So I'm going to run it and we're going to just look at how that looks and feels. And as you can see, it's very quick to navigate. This has the ergonomics of a desktop spreadsheet. Navigation is very simple. You can use arrows or you can use your mouse. You simply click on the values on the spreadsheet. You can update it. There are some drop downs, of course, to control some of the entries. Maybe a little bit hard to see, but these numbers are actually recalculating live. And so there's no process to save. Everything is automatically saved. This particular spreadsheet is being done for a CM type of proposal. And so we can enter in negotiated fee and overhead rates, and everything is instantly costed and repriced. And right from RedTeam, we can generate a proposal for our clients. And like I said, this was actually a live look at using the user interface. And don't worry about trying to take notes on any of this. We're going to share this proposal with you after the webinar. It's important to note here that this cost estimate is in the ecosystem linked between RedTeam and Sage Intacct. So the cost structure produced by this estimate is fully compatible with the cost structure in Intacct. And specifically, I'm talking about phase, cost codes, and cost categories. These are entirely compatible also with Sage 100 and Sage 300. The next workflow we're going to look at is how quotes from pre-construction get converted to commitments. What's very interesting about this process is that people often don't think about how much work goes into actually creating commitments. For most contractors, even contractors with a lot of software, this involves using Word documents and Excel spreadsheets and various templates, and they cobble together their contractual agreements. What's very powerful about RedTeam is a best-in-class solution for creating and managing contracts and commitments. And so let's take a look at this process. And in this example, we have a user who is taking quotes from pre-construction and converting them into a subcontract agreement. As you may have seen there, we selected a template. What's very distinctive about RedTeam templates is that the selection of the template and the selection of the options inside this editor actually drive and instrument the workflows over the life of the project. And an example of that would be things like insurance requirements. So to the extent that insurance requirements are actually selected in the creation of the commitment, this allows your back office team to only be validating the insurance requirements required by this specific agreement. Oftentimes we take a blanket approach to the requirements of a particular project, and we apply it across all the contracts regardless of how the individual agreements were structured. And again, this is fully compatible with the cost code structure and the categories in Sage Intacct. So the third workflow, and I know that you're very familiar with these processes and you're very familiar with the pain that occurs sometimes. Getting a latest revised estimate at complete has always been difficult. Most contractors are preparing these forecasted costs on spreadsheets. And for most, it involves manually reviewing job cost reports, looking at subcontract agreements, keeping track of potential changes in the owner contract and all of the subcontracts. It's a huge lift for most people doing this process manually. RedTeam automates almost all of this. And in my example, this is illustrates how upon issuance of a commitment, project teams are actually prompted to adjust their estimated cost at complete at that time by adjusting a number that we call at risk. The at risk represents the value of the work not yet procured to complete the project. So simply by making those updated entries at the time that contract commitments are let, allows users to have a real-time estimated cost at complete. What's very powerful about the report you see on the screen right now is that RedTeam actually calculates revenue on a real-time basis, on a percentage of completion basis. And it'll also compare that to the amount billed. It'll also measure the amount of working capital tied up in this project. These are important to the finance team, but they should also be just as important to the construction team, whose job it is to control the money on the project. So the fourth workflow we're going to demonstrate here is routing and approval of vendor invoices. This is another pain point for everybody. Back in the old days, I used to have to go out to the superintendent's truck and dig through and try and find documents because it was very hard to keep track of things. This is an end-to-end electronic process that allows users to open a vendor invoice subject to approval from an inbox and to review the amounts claimed against the schedule of values, provide an approval and forward it on for additional approvals as required by your organization's approval routing requirements. So as you can see, dollar amounts are entered against the SOV. Dollars cannot be approved unless it's on the schedule of values, and it can only get on the schedule of values by virtue of being contracted, either part of the original contract or part of a change order. You can see in this example, we've actually released the retainage. We're going through and we're verifying compliance with all of the insurance credentials. We can also look at the status of the lien waivers, not only for your vendor, but any sub-tier claimants beneath. And we can also rate the performance of the vendor, provide the information necessary for the accounting team to actually process this disbursement. Pretty amazing. Very impactful for people's day-to-day experience in managing construction. So we're here to talk about also Sage Intacct integration. So one of the things you may have noticed in all four of those sample workflows that we looked at, nowhere did it appear that there was a process or a discrete process to literally send a transaction to Sage Intacct. And the reason for that is we've implemented what we think is a pretty novel approach to integration. We call it event-driven. And so event-driven integration allows the activities, the normal day-to-day activities of system users to push those transactions into Sage Intacct and to pull information back from Sage Intacct automatically. And so from a user's perspective, they're simply doing the work they need to do each day. And the system is actually handling the exchange of the information between the two platforms, invisible to most users. Now, for our admin users and our controller, certainly there's a high level of visibility of transactions moving back and forth between the two platforms. But for a regular day-to-day user, all of that's invisible. Their focus is going to be on those core day-to-day workflows with no need to know about all the moving parts behind. And part of that is essential to delivering a great experience for users and keeping them out of the mundane details of what they do each day and allowing them the time and opportunity to focus on the big picture. Because we're providing this deck, I'm not going to go through each of these in detail, but there's really two levels of integration between the two systems. One of them is we call configuration and maintenance. These are things that are typically done one time. To the extent transactions are linked, that facilitates the integration in the future. On a day-to-day basis, we do have a complete detail of what transactions are exchanged between the two systems. And we're also still building, so we have additional functionality coming out in the future, but everything we demonstrated in the 4 core workflows is supported by the integration today. So getting to Intacct. As we've described, RedTeam provides a completely self-contained project management environment for your construction operations teams. And what we mean by that is they don't have to go anywhere to get information from anywhere else in the organization. We've queued up the information that enables them to have all of what they need to be completely successful, functional, effective, and efficient within our platform environment. And that's important because to the extent that people are relying on sending emails and leaving voicemails and trying to obtain information from others, slows down the process. It's inefficient, and allowing people to have the information and obtain the information on their own volition is far more efficient. As I mentioned, RedTeam is a best-in-class platform for creating and negotiating and executing contractual agreements. The platform itself manages not only the agreement documents themselves, but it also tracks all of the metadata associated with the interactions. And so we have a very robust record of not just the contract documents, but how the contracts were negotiated, when they were executed, and how many times they were reviewed. It's a very robust record of the company's commitments from a contractual perspective. This capability is really great because it's efficient. It's also something that we can leverage to help users who may be using legacy applications like Sage 100 and 300, or even other applications like QuickBooks Online, giving them the ability to migrate those existing RedTeam instances to a new accounting platform, Sage Intacct in this case, without having any kind of interruption to your projects in progress. And I know that as we look at the opportunity for moving to cloud, the thought of a large-scale implementation is pretty daunting. This is about as easy as it can get. And I say that from the perspective of having done a lot of system conversions in my career. Even prior to being in the construction industry, my expertise was in finance and accounting, and my specialty was the implementation of large-scale ERP applications. And this is night and day compared to what it was like in the old days. And Walt, I'm sure you've got some experience with ERP implementation. I know you can certainly relate to the pain and the trepidation people might have regarding an implementation. But being able to synchronize all this information and isolate your project teams from the implementation is a huge opportunity. And it could certainly go a long way to streamlining that implementation of cloud software for your team.
I would agree with that, Michael. And I think that one of the big concerns is as our Sage 100 and Sage 300 customers look forward to making the move to Sage Intacct is that big question that I think you're addressing here, which is what happens to my projects that are in process right now? Do I lose any data along the way? Is there a way to use RedTeam to sort of help me make that transition, that migration to the Sage Intacct product?
Yeah, and I can tell you, we have migrated people between accounting systems, and it's something that occurs without any kind of interruption to the project team. In fact, they don't even know it's happening because it's that seamless.
That's pretty amazing.
So we've got some time now to answer questions. I know we've got some questions coming in on the chat.
Okay, if we're ready for the questions, I have the first one here. RedTeam does talk to QuickBooks in the same way. Please confirm.
It does. So RedTeam connected to QuickBooks Online versus it looks exactly the same from the project team's perspective. And so all the workflows that you looked at would look identical. So for somebody that is outgrowing QuickBooks Online, they're interested in moving to Sage Intacct, they could do that without any interruption to the workflows that we presented today.
Perfect. Second question.
Real quickly, that's a great point, Michael. I just want to back that up and say one of the things we're noticing with Sage Intacct is that, and especially in our construction group, is that there are a lot of QuickBooks users out there that have run out of gas, and Sage Intacct provides a really nice place for them to go, and this integration makes that much easier.
Okay, second question. Will RedTeam move active contracts and commitments to the new accounting system?
The answer is yes. So if you're on another accounting system, if you're on Sage 100 or Sage 300, and you have a dozen projects in progress, each with 20 or 30 open commitments, there would be nothing to do to support that migration. And in fact, it would be essentially invisible to users because we would disconnect the legacy application and reconnect to Sage Intacct, and all of those contracts in progress would be unaffected by that process.
Okay, I have one more. Does RedTeam provide sufficient internal controls to prevent unauthorized transactions?
Actually, that is a big differentiator for RedTeam. The internal control is a big issue in the platform. And so for all the controllers and the finance vice presidents in our audience, it would be very interesting for you to know that all of the internal control infrastructure is enforced across the entire platform. And so users can only see and do what you've authorized them to do. So it's a very tightly controlled system, which is ironic because it's also way easier to use than traditional applications or manual processes, but it is a very controlled process. So there's no concern about somebody authorizing a disbursement unless they actually have the authority to do so.
Okay, great. One more. Is the connection between RedTeam and Intacct in real time?
Yes, it's a real-time connection. For certain transactions that are pulled from Intacct, there may be there's a timer that you can set, so you can decide if you want to pull job costs every hour, every 3 hours. It depends upon the size and the scale of your organization, but you can choose whatever makes sense for your team.
That's a powerful capability, Michael. Really nice.
Are there any limits on RedTeam if used as the primary repository for contracts, insurance certificates, and lien waivers?
There is no limit on the number of documents or the amount of data you can store in RedTeam. Well, I suppose you could answer that for the Sage Intacct side.
Same there. There's no limit in terms of data. You're in the cloud's limitless. We don't have limitations there.
Okay, I have one more. How long is it going to take this integration?
Well, I can say many years ago, we would always plan for at least a year for an integration. our empirical experience with RedTeam and integrating with accounting systems it's really more a matter of weeks. Some can be even faster for an organization that is at the end of an accounting period and they're really just opening with an opening trial balance in the accounting system. It could really be done in days. And RedTeam, because RedTeam handles the bulk of the data entry into the accounting system, it actually makes it very easy to implement.
I'd also add to that, Michael, and say I think part of that answer could be in two parts, really. Part of that answer depends upon whether you've already made the transition or the migration from Sage 100 and Sage 300 to Sage Intacct. If that's all been done, then of course bringing your RedTeam data along is going to be probably a much shorter effort after that. If you're doing it all at the same time, there's a lot of moving parts and pieces there, so that can affect the length of time for integration.
Actually, that's a great point. To the extent that somebody's already using the RedTeam platform and connected to another system, the integration can be very, very fast. We can disconnect and reconnect to a new accounting platform pretty easily. If you're starting without RedTeam and you're on a legacy platform, I would recommend actually implementing RedTeam first. Moving all your project information onto the RedTeam platform, and then migrating to Sage Intacct. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, Walt.
No, I think that's a great point because of the way you do the integration. It does bring things live and in place across to Intacct. And so if, although it's probably a little challenging to implement a system and do a migration at the same time, but if you're planning to go that way anyway, that's not a bad way to go.
Okay, I have one more question. Is there a technical guide that can be provided for us to have a better understanding of the capability of the integration?
There is. And so in addition to some of the technical information about how the integration works, details like API calls will provide that. But generally speaking, the training for use of the integration is really training for use of the platform. Because the connectivity between the two systems is so transparent, it's really a matter of training your team members to use the combined system. And so as we looked at the workflow examples that we demonstrated, there's really no need for a user to understand that they're seeing information either from RedTeam or Sage. They're actually seeing information from both systems, but it's transparent and invisible to users. So really all their focus is on making the right decision about a cost estimate or approving a disbursement to a subcontractor, releasing retainage. Whatever it is they're doing, they can focus on the job that has to get done as opposed to the integration that's going on behind the scenes.
Okay, great. One more. Are only active projects migrated? If a client wanted all their history transferred into Intacct, would that be an option?
Actually, that's a great question. The way our integration works is you can actually connect at the project level. And this is really helpful for somebody who may be on another PM system to ease that transition. We allow users to connect at the project level. And so you could literally have some projects on one system and other projects on another. And RedTeam will only connect and integrate the projects you designate to be connected to Sage Intacct.
And I'll add to that, Michael, and just say that when you as a customer, you're a Sage 100 or Sage 300 customer, are making that decision to move to Intacct, there's a lot of decisions along the way in terms of how much data from past years or past projects you want to maybe do all at one time. As many of you may be aware, we have a loyalty program where we're allowing you access to your Sage 300, 100 software over time as you implement your Sage Intacct, so you don't ever break that connection. But certainly there may be I would call it a practical limit to how much data you want to integrate as you start your experience in Intacct, and that all can be addressed with your consultant and your implementation folks as they get you ready to do that.
Perfect. I have one more. Does the interface connect to the owner contract and owner billings?
Yes, it does. And so RedTeam does have, and that's one of the workflows I did not demonstrate today, but certainly one of the workflows in RedTeam is to, since you're creating the proposal, you actually create a full schedule of values for the prime contract, for the customer contract rather. And so your billing is very similar to the way that vendors are submitting progress against their contracts. So we do generate a standard AIA application for payment, and that information is sent and synchronized with Intacct, as well as the other accounting systems.
Okay, great. And then I have one next question. Do the cost codes set up in RedTeam transfer?
They do. And so during the initial implementation, all the cost codes would be synchronized between the two systems. It depends upon your permissions, but it is possible to create additional cost codes. I believe the way our Intacct integration works, the cost codes are controlled on the Intacct side. And so to add a new cost code that isn't in RedTeam already would require the admin team to add the cost code to the Intacct platform. And that cost code would automatically show up in RedTeam.
Okay, I have one last question. How compatible is RedTeam with Sage 100% currently? Will it perform the functions shown here today, or do you have to go Intacct?
That's a great question. So I think the only thing that we showed that is not available in Sage 100 today is the grouping of the cost estimate by phase, because I'm recalling Sage 100 doesn't support phase. Sage 300 supports phase. It calls it extra inside the Sage 300 platform.
I think we're done with the questions.
Awesome. Well, those are some great questions. Like I said, our plan is to share this deck with the attendees today. I think it'll be very helpful. I know that we went very quickly through some of those demos. When you have the deck, you'll be able to replay the demo. So I think you'll be able to recreate the experience for other people on your team. And certainly, please reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm open to anybody on this webinar to reach out to me, connect with me on LinkedIn. And I'm happy to get on a call with anyone and talk about your unique circumstances. And we can talk about what a transition might look like. And Walt, I'm sure you've got resources available too.
As well, yes, and certainly your partner that works with you for your Sage 100 to 300 accounts will be there available to answer questions as well, and they work closely with Michael and RedTeam as well.
I see we're getting a couple more questions coming in.
I'm
That's
happy
great.
to read them. Is there functionality with submittals, RFIs, etc., or is it just project admin and accounting?
Quite honestly, I should have mentioned that. It was outside the scope of today's webinar, but RedTeam does provide very robust project management capability. We handle all the RFIs, submittals, drawings, drawing markup, field collaboration. RedTeam is a complete and robust commercial construction project management platform. And so it has all of that capability that you're describing and quite a bit more. Even things like meeting minutes and closeout documents. RedTeam is a very robust platform.
And just one last statement for your information, 100 Con does support phase. It's called phase, comparable to extras.
Oh, excellent. So I stand corrected. So apparently Sage 100 does support phase. And so then the answer is yes, everything we demonstrated today works exactly the way it was presented on Sage 100, Sage 300, certainly QuickBooks Online, and Sage Intacct. So that would be an experience you can create for your users immediately. And then it gives you the ability to bridge all of those in progress projects into the Sage Intacct platform.
No more questions.
Okay, it looks like we're through our questions. I want to thank everybody who joined today. We look forward to talking to you more about your individual circumstances, and we're happy to connect with you, even if it's just for a brainstorming session. And I know your Sage partners as well. More than likely, we've got a relationship with your current Sage channel partners. So we're happy to have a meeting with your channel partner and anyone else on your team that would be interested in RedTeam, connected to one of the legacy applications, or support for moving RedTeam from your current system to Sage Intacct. All right, thanks everybody for joining.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael.